of string, and I'm waiting here quiet till I know what it means, and I'm open to receive just whatever it is, whatever you send floating down the Verdigris.
Will Rogers, American. Yes, he was probably the most popular and beloved American of his day.
Will Rogers, who from the early days of aviation loved flying almost as much as he did a game of polo. Will Rogers, the humorist, who never forgot he was just plain Will Rogers American. His words hurt none, but brought enjoyment to millions.
At Claremore, Oklahoma, state of his birth, stands the impressive tomb of Will Rogers. Here sleeps the simple, kindly man who gave America so much of her laughter. And at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., Mrs. Sally McSpadden, sister of the famed humorist, unveiled his bronze likeness in Statuary Hall, the country's highest tribute. Will Rogers had joined America's immortals in the nation's Hall of Fame.
My name is Beau Jennings, and Will Rogers is my hero. He has been ever since I was a young boy. People often ask me what it is about Will that makes him so inspirational to me, and I've always wondered what it was myself. I decided to write these songs about Will and sing them while I retrace his footsteps to help me find out why. I think it's true that he was the #1 movie star and #1 radio commentator and #1 columnist.
It could be.
All at the same time.
It could be. That guy was, I don't know anybody today that was like him. He was just outstanding. An old cowboy that grew up up here. What's the name of that town?
Oologah.
Oologah. And he started on stage with a rope, and he was fancy with the rope, and then he just started spreading out. And I recall, I don't know where I saw these. It would show him whirling a rope around on stage, and then he'd make a couple of comments, and he took off from there.
So I have some pictures of what Will Rogers used to look like.
Okay.
What I sort of want the hair to look like. So I'll show you, and you can tell me what you think. I mean, it's a pretty basic haircut, you know. Just sort of, you know, close and tight, sort of neat. And then that one. Does that kind of give you an idea?
Mm-hmm.
You guys know what Will Rogers looks like?
I know his hair is lighter than yours.
Lighter.
Lighter, wasn't it? So are you doing it for a school project, or?
It's just kind of my own thing. It's he kind of fascinates me, and he's kind of always been my hero. When I was really little, my mom used to take me to the Will Rogers Museum, and I don't know why. It's hard to pinpoint why he was so inspiring to me. So I hear you saying you're gonna tell your kids about Will.
Yeah, I said I'm really curious to see.
Text them and
tell
see.
my children.
See if they know who Will Rogers is.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to text my daughter and ask her what she knows about him.
We got to find out if people have forgotten about Will Rogers.
Kinda. Why? I told you.
So they said kinda. Why do you want to know?
Yeah.
Tell him he's an important cultural figure. One of your customers says he's an important cultural figure. Yeah, let's just scoot it in here. The idea behind this was to make a floating memorial to the actual spot where Will Rogers was born. I was a big fan of Will when I was small. It was the first museum I went to, the Will Rogers Museum in Claremore. And when I started writing songs, had a band, I got really into exploring historical stuff, Oklahoma stuff in particular. And then when I moved to New York, that desire got even stronger. And I really wanted to, it was just a wealth of material to write about. So, and you know, when you move away, when you're away from home, somehow you're hyper-focused on your home. So the songs were kind of a way to start exploring what else there was to him besides just, you know, a comedian, which is how a lot of people ended up seeing him.
Yes, Will Rogers was undoubtedly the world's greatest roper. In his early vaudeville act, he never spoke at all. But later in New York, he began to describe his tricks. The audience laughed. Will expanded his remarks, and in no time, he was making penetrating comments on topics of the day. This immediately took him into musical comedy. But the boy from Oologah little realized that he was just at the start of his career.
It feels like it's the culmination of all my years of trying to learn how to write good songs. It feels like it's all led up to this project.
I feel my blood start to move a little faster. Here where the river brings her burdens of darkness before the dawn, and a glow beneath the surface.
You know, all this water here that covers up his place of birth comes from the Verdigris River. It goes through Will's hometown of Oologah, and it also goes through my hometown of Inola. It is a line that you can draw from my hometown to his.
Before the water came rushing in, before a marker could be made, I'll sing a song instead for the life here floating in this place. May the water always be still. When the clouds above start to gather, may the thunder clap and the lightning shear. When the wind takes a story to scatter, and may the water come rushing in, may the marker finally be made. I'll sing a song instead for the life here floating in this place. And may the water come rushing in, may the marker finally be made. I'll sing a song instead for the life here floating in this place.
How you guys feel? You wanna?
I could do it a couple more times.
They help you?
Yeah, well, just to warm up. Yeah,
Okay.
my muscles are still a little tight.
Really just think the rhythm ahead.
not to slow down. Yeah, because I feel like sometimes we're getting a little bit behind the beat. At the very end, you know, really just drive that rhythm, because it's all you from that point, like that the person that controls the rhythm.
About like post last verse.
I guess so. When they drop out and it's just kind of the strings, you know. So really, you know, we think forward, you know, pushing that beat.
I'm thinking maybe the three of us will stand when we get out there, because simply so that I don't have to round up chairs. Will Rogers to Betty Blake. I could just love a girl about your caliber, see? You know I was always kind of headstrong about you anyway. But I am plumb blue up here and need consolation and haven't a soul that I can confide in. I am yours, any old time. Bill, that's me. By the way, subject this penmanship to a rigid treatment of guessing, then serve. Will Rogers married Betty Blake on the front yard of her parents' house in a small town in Arkansas, and they stayed married until Will's death.
Now she might have took my eyes first, but her light never burned like yours did. And the more you told me no, it got a little bit more cold. And when it finally froze, around the world I slid.
That house is gone now, and all we found when we got there was an empty lot with an old boat, an abandoned ATM machine, a meatpacking plant across the street, and a small stone marker in the ground. Visiting the place of his marriage to Betty was important to me and helped me get a fuller picture of Will's life.
We're here in New York City, and we are making our way towards Times Square. We're on 42nd Street right now. Times Square is the spot where the New Amsterdam Theater is located, which is where Will Rogers really first started to make a name for himself.
By 1910, the mass of urban Americans lived in big cities like New York, where Rogers played vaudeville after years traveling the global rodeo circuit. In a Baltimore theater in 1916, Will Rogers launched himself as a national commentator. Will Rogers came into the spotlight as a humorist specializing in national issues.
And here he is on the roof of Ziegfeld's New Amsterdam Theater, high above New York's 42nd Street. These are early pictures of his costume and act. Now it's the Ziegfeld Follies. He's still twirling that loop, but the rope and the familiar chewing gum have become only a background for his witty comments on timely topics.
He would do his cowboy routine, his rope tricks with the girls behind him during the main show in the evening. And later at night, there was a second show on the rooftop. And this show was sort of a precursor to maybe The Tonight Show or Dave Letterman or something. It was definitely a place to be seen. If you came to this show and you're in the audience and he spotted you and he made fun of you, that was a notch in your belt.
Who you talking to?
You.
Little boss. That's how I be going every day on the street. You see, I'm still spinning here without a beat.
You got any raps about Will Rogers? He used to perform here back in the 1920s.
Heroes is to be remembered, never forgotten. I don't keep my memories stuck in my pocket. I keep it in my heart. Will Rogers, he inspired all of us to take our start, be a part of something that's great. Oklahoma is where it started, and it's being fracked in New York, brought here today. So I gotta remember what I say. I gotta remember what you said. I understand that you still got the memories in your head, and the best thing to say is like, listen, this guy is more than a role model. You could tell he was on a mission.
I tried many times to get permission to get on the roof of the New Amsterdam Theater. I left voicemails, I wrote letters, I asked everyone I could think of, but no one could help me. My last resort was to go there and try my luck in person.
Sir?
Yeah.
Did you just catch what I said? Yeah. Otherwise, the police will be in here taking you out.
Okay.
No filming this building.
Okay.
Without permission.
Okay. I think the term for what just happened is getting shut down. They are very, very tight with their rules, but they're not even. I can't even get inside past the lobby, past the vestibule. We were turned away by the staff at the theater. We were given some other leads, some ideas about maybe taking elevators up to some other buildings to maybe see the rooftop or get some other perspective. None of those really panned out either. However, we came here across the street and were able to find a good perch. There's obviously no way to get a quiet place to sing your song. Everybody's competing for space and attention here.
Everyone came down a believer from the New Amsterdam Theater. They went out with a mystic glow onto 42nd Street below. I'm just telling you what I read about a rooftop revival when Times Square was dead. Those people were like spilling into the street and into the night where the avenues meet. They're a long, long way from home. They're a long, long way from home.
The song is called Scattered Lights, and the idea is that people were inspired, people were lit up, so to speak, after seeing Will perform, and he was such a bright spot. So that's what that song's about. The song is also about his conflicted feelings at the time. His family was just getting going, and he had a couple kids, and he was married to Betty, and as family life was starting to grow, his career was demanding more and more time from him, and he never really lost a sense of wanting to return to Oklahoma and his initial idea was to go back and take over his father's ranch in Oologah. And so while he was here, he struggled with whether to stay and whether to go back to Oklahoma.
William Shakespeare, and you got Yogi Berra, and you got Will Rogers. Three of a kind right there that you can quote. Sometimes I kiss my cell phone. Will never did have that problem with it. When I was younger, I used to try to rodeo, and I tried the whole smear, tried everything, and I figured out I better try to make a living some other way.
What made you want to come work here?
I was raised here in town, and I've had a lot of people tell me that I look like. They'd say, you know who you look like? And I'd say, Elvis Presley. And they'd say, no, he looked like Will Rogers. So with Chamber of Commerce would do the gridiron, or some church would have a play or something, they needed a Will, they'd come get me to be the Will Rogers. So the gal that was the director here back several years ago, Michelle, she kept on trying to get me to come up here. So I've been retired for several years. So I promised. I said, okay, I'm ready to do it. And once I got up here and got to doing this, I have more fun than the kids do. See, when Will first started talking, he was doing a dumb act on the stage, and he tried to jump out of a loop like that. Supposedly, he caught his foot in there going out and stopped and looked at the crowd. He said, got all my feet out there but one. And they laughed at him, and it embarrassed him at first, and then that's what kind of gave him the idea that maybe he needed to add a little humor, so he started missing rope tricks on purpose. I don't have that problem.
Rogers was always roping. These are some of the earliest slow-motion pictures. The scenes are from The Ropin' Fool, a film he himself produced to preserve a picture record of his tricks. It was made, he said, to show you young ropers what I could do when I was your age. Even in his later years, Will Rogers could rope and tie a goat in 8 seconds. This is a rollback catch called a Johnny Blocker. Watch the rope go out and roll back over the steer in perfect timing. He would rope anything in sight, man, beast, or even fowl. Yes, Will Rogers was undoubtedly the world's greatest roper.
Of course, my father, people back in those days, my dad was born back in 1901, and he used to quote Will, and I'd hear a lot of his quotes growing up. I didn't know they were Will's quotes, but you'd hear a lot of the, buy land, it's a good investment, spend your money on it, because they ain't making any more of it. Things like that, I'd heard my dad say, and I thought he made those up. And so I found out different. My favorite one on Will has to do with this humility, that no man is great who thinks he is. And he said, I've teased all the big men, but he says, the man's big enough you can tease him. It's that little man sometimes that can't take the teasing, that thinks he's big. And things along that line is what my favorite sense about Will. Because Will was just, what you see is what you got with him. He didn't change. He was the same. Walked among kings and remained a common man. Knew kings and queens, but he'd stop and talk to any man on the street, spend just as much time with them as anybody. And that's the thing that I like more about Will, I think, than anybody. He never forgot that he was from Oklahoma. Oklahomans never forgot him. Our centennial year in 07, we voted who was the most loved Oklahoman of all time. And, he beat Reba McEntire and Garth Brooks. And, of course, Carrie Underwood wasn't that popular then. He may not beat her now. No, I've read a lot about Will. And he's been my hero for a long time.
I'm a songwriter, and I'm from Inola, so fairly close to here. I live in New York now. But
That's quite a jump.
It is. But
quite a culture shock to go downhill from Inola to New York City.
Yeah, exactly. But Will's always been a favorite of mine too, and very important to me. So I started writing songs, and so I'm just, I'm gathering some more information and
getting. We want to keep his name out there. That's what we do here. Our mission statement here is to collect, preserve, and to share the life, the humor, and the wisdom of Will Rogers for all generations. So we're glad you helping us do it.
One reaction I've gotten from a number of people is that they're, I guess, encouraged to see that younger folks are interested in Will Rogers and doing something that's, I guess, in some ways relevant or current about him. So hopefully, hopefully tonight I can show off these tunes and get the word out a little more about what the project's about, and just drum up more support, because it's a very, and that's another thing I'm excited about, is sharing the songs with people, because it's felt really lonely actually working on it, because I'm not playing these songs in concert all the time. I'm kind of saving them. I'm ultimately saving them for when, we release this record and release this film. How do I do this? So any chance I get to talk about the songs and play them for people it feels good. It feels good. It feels legitimizing or something. So this next song is when the country went through its most recent recession. I was kind of thinking about how Will was such an influence during the actual Depression in the 30s. And I was hoping to write a tune that might kind of be what Will would have to say today if he was still around. The song is called The Economy Stupid Blues. I got in line for soup this morning. I left my car by the side of the road. No food in the kitchen, no gas in the tank. No job to wake up for tomorrow. They say there's lines to jump out a window. They're throwing plots out on the river. You can pay all the money that you ever made, but she takes more than you can get.
Downtown location, and when he'd come to town, if there's any time there was a speaking engagement at the Mayo, legend has that he was always late because he'd get a rubber chicken anywhere, but he'd come and eat Ike's chili. And even when he came into town when we were closed, he'd actually go to my grandfather's house and bang on the door and he'd come in, and of course we'd make chili for him, you know. But
at home?
No, go to the restaurant and make it. And you know, he said that chili was a bowl of blessedness, and he used to rate cities by the quality of their chili. And in the book, Will Rogers' book, talks about how Ike's chili, that Tulsa's going to be okay because of Ike's chili. So just a neat man, just a lot of great stories.
I imagine you grew up with your grandpa telling you Will Rogers stories, and you grew up with a pretty strong impression of Will Rogers.
Yes, I just unbelievable. Some of my favorite. I just love his quotes. I love reading about him. Just what a good man. What a sense of humor.
Sounds like you find him pretty inspiring.
Very inspiring, especially back then when the way the world was back then, and they needed, he can make some pretty humorous statements about some pretty sad things.
And the thing about my jokes is they don't hurt anybody. You can take them or leave them, you know what I mean? But with Congress, every time they make a joke, it's a law. And every time they make a law, it's a joke.
But he can also take a situation and just really make you think. Still today, his quote's real relevant. One of my favorite ones, which I think would apply even more today, but it would apply to both political parties, is when he said he's not a member of an organization, of an organized. How do you know that one?
Yeah,
I'm not a member of an organized.
Any organized political party.
I'm a Democrat.
Right.
Yeah. And right now, I think you could say Republican, Democrat, and it doesn't matter.
We must have some 80 or 90,000 people here tonight. That's the most people that ever paid to see a politician. Now, here tonight, Governor, you are not allowed to refer to politics. They won't let anyone talk politics in here because this stadium was dedicated to art, sports, and any useful enterprises.
You know, and he just read the newspaper and came up with all of that. It's really a phenomenal story, and he inspired millions, right?
He's very inspiring to me as a songwriter, you know, a folk songwriter.
Right.
That's kind of my way of exploring him as a source of inspiration.
Yeah.
And I don't know if paying tribute is the word, but it is my way of, you know, kind of looking for Will Rogers, finding out why that's so why is it so important to me? And I still don't know sometimes, but it's interesting you speaking about your grandfather. My grandfather first brought me to Ike's when I was in 8th grade, to this location. And he passed away a few years ago. The last thing he ever ate was a bowl of Ike's chili. I brought him a bowl of Ike's chili.
Yeah.
And often when I think about Will, I think about my grandfather. It's interesting how he's kind of this, it's like he's this, almost like this hub of some sort of wheel, and, you know, we're the tire and our grandparents
right.
are.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think that there's a lot of that about Ike's chili, about how, you know, you don't really want to publicize. It would be a horrible ad campaign, but we have several people that tell us that story. Or they'll come by, well, my dad's dying, and, you know, he wanted Ike's chili, so we got him Ike's chili. So, but, I mean, but we hear that story a lot, and it touches your heart.
Yeah, I mean, when
just to know, it didn't mean that much. Because I recently lost my grandfather in the
By 1918, the man with the magic rope had been claimed by Hollywood to make silent pictures. By now, Will Rogers was world famous. As a motion picture star, he held all box office records for 1933. He was tops in radio. His charity performances innumerable. His benefit tours raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for relief during the depths of the Depression. But he was perhaps best known for his newspaper column, Will Rogers' Remarks, which appeared on the front page of over 500 papers. It was the most widely read daily column in all history, a pungent paragraph of homely comment and penetrating wit. To gather information for this column, he flew all over the world. He was commercial aviation's biggest booster. But Will Rogers, motion picture star, philosopher, newspaper columnist, has left an immortal heritage. But of all things, he wanted to be best remembered for his famous line, which summed up his life: I never met a man I didn't like.
Sort of in the middle of the Great Depression, Will Rogers gave a speech that was aired nationally over the radio. He was speaking right before President Hoover, and he was just sort of addressing the nation. That speech became known as the Bacon, Beans, and Limousine speech. He was attempting to encourage the country, trying to bolster him up, and he also was calling out a lot of the leaders at the time for their mismanagement of their corporations. And anyway, at the time it was known for its impact, the impact it had on people. Everybody heard it. And today it's almost as well known, simply because a lot of the same conditions have happened again. In the speech, he talks about the over-merging and the over-capitalization of corporations, and you don't have to look far to see evidence of that. So it's sort of a timely speech.
The only problem that confronts this country today is that at least 7 million people are out of work. That's our only problem. There is no other one before us at all. It's to see that every man that wants to, able to work, is allowed to find a place to go to work. Prohibition, you hear a lot about that. Well, that's nothing to compare to your neighbor's children that are hungry. It's food, it ain't drink that we're worried about today. Here a few years ago, we were so afraid that the poor people would liable to take a drink that now we've fixed so they can't even get something to eat. Here we are in a country with more wheat, more corn, more money in the bank, more cotton, more everything in the world. There's not a product that you can name that we haven't got more of it than any country ever had on the face of the earth. And yet we've got people starving. We'll hold the distinction of being the only nation in the history of the world that ever went to the poorhouse in an automobile. The potter's field are lined with granaries full of grain. Now, if they ain't something cockeyed in an arrangement like that, then this microphone here in front of me is, well, it's a cuspidor.
The tune I wrote about it is, I didn't try to do a lot of writing per se. I really tried to rephrase parts of the speech. So the song came out a little different than one I would typically write. The next trick was finding out where he gave that speech from, and no one seems to know for sure. But I did a little research of my own and feedback from a few others, and it seems like the best guess is somewhere here in Koreatown in Los Angeles. So we think we pinpointed the intersection, and we found out where Will Rogers delivered his bacon, beans, and limousine speech. That building is gone, I do know that. Times have changed, but this is the spot. This is where we're going to do the song.
Now don't get scared and turn off your radio.
I guess in a way that the song is supposed to be performed once at its specific spot in lieu of a plaque or a photo or whatever. There's a song performance.
Let the radio waves bring you back to shore. Let the radio waves bring you back to shore. Let them crash and roll and rip and roll. Let the radio waves bring you back to shore.
It was important for me to visit this house as an important location in Will Rogers' life. You know, I have a family now. I have a wife and a kid. And, you know, I definitely have a domestic side of my life that, you know, I'm learning to balance with my professional and also creative side. So I guess there's an element of being here and experiencing what Will had is kind of like his domestic refuge, getting a sense of what goes on here or what went on here. You know, I guess I can relate to a place like this. One of the things that struck me when I first saw it was his pair of cowboy boots at the end of the bed. I kind of had, I guess, like a visceral reaction to that. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was cool to say the least. And then you walk around the house and you see other stuff. You see his magazines that he flipped through. You have the piano still here in the living room that Will Rogers' family played. You have the banjo that Will bought at the train station in Oologah when he first met his soon-to-be wife, Betty. So there's a connection not only through music and the notes and vibrations, but also through the physical instruments.
Did I come here looking for a friend or a ghost? What was I gonna find out here on the coast? If you get a new body, would it be the same? What are we gonna find on Santa Monica Range?
I came to California unsure if I'd be allowed to play on Will's piano. When I arrived, I was told it was too delicate to touch and probably out of tune. I asked the curator if I could at least sit at the piano, and she agreed. Once I did, she was curious how it sounded and asked me to play a chord.
First I hear the piano start to play, then I hear bare feet coming up the stairs. I close my eyes and I set out the boots. When I open my eyes, the boots aren't there. I hear a typewriter key start striking. I hear the back door open, horses outside waiting. Walk over to the desk and I see a new page. I read the first line and I start shaking.
75 years later, and the piano was still in tune. So I want you to tell me about when you were in Long Island, New York, and when you heard, what you heard about Will Rogers when you were there.
Yeah, well, Beau and I were visiting in Long Island, New York, and
Beau was your twin brother.
Beau, my twin brother. And we were in this movie. It was Hempstead, Long Island, and all of a sudden the lights came on, and they announced that Will Rogers was dead. He'd crashed up in Alaska. It was a shock to the nation. That guy was something else. We knew who he was from the time we were 8 years old. It was Will Rogers this and Will Rogers that, and that was a blow to everybody when that guy died. He was on his, I think they were going around the world, I think, best I recall.
They were flying through Alaska because they were trying to find a new air route for the mail.
Oh, okay.
For the post office.
Yeah. And Wiley Post was his pilot. One-eyed guy. Yeah.
One-eyed pilot.
Yeah.
I followed Will's footsteps from coast to coast, unsure of what would happen at each stop. But the most challenging of all was the final trip to Alaska. The town of Barrow is very remote. It's the northernmost community in the United States. It was difficult to plan in advance how I would get to the crash site, which was 15 miles away from the town itself. I knew it would be very important to speak to a man named Perry Ekpiaha, the grandson of Claire, the last man to ever speak to Will Rogers before he died.
Hi.
Hello, are you Perry?
Oh, yeah.
Perry of Beau Jennings.
Beau Jennings.
I'm glad to finally meet you. How are you?
Yeah, fine. Doing okay.
So what happened? How does the story go?
Flying from Fairbanks to Barrow. It was kind of foggy and cloudy, so they decided to land down there by the lake with a float plane. They saw some people down there camping. They got off the plane and spoke to my grandparents Claire and Stella Opera. So they asked him which way and how far Barrow is. So my grandfather told him that it's no more than a 10-minute flight. They shook their hands and said goodbye and see you some other times, you know, and then they hopped back in the plane, started taking off, and then while they're up in the air, the engine misfired, went dead, and then went nose down into that shallow lagoon. So my grandfather, he got close as possible as he could to the plane, and then he shouted and shouted and shouted, and there was no answer. There was no snow machine at the time, no four-wheelers, ATVs, so he had to run from out there to Barrow side to give the words that something had serious happened down there.
Okay, this is your...
My great-grandfather.
This is your great-grandfather, Charlie Brower, and he writes, about 9 that night, while I sat at home working on some specimens to be sent outside, there came a sharp knock, followed immediately by the headlong entrance of a painting Eskimo named Claire Ekpiha. Whatever had brought him in on the run, it was plain from his face that something pretty serious had happened. There was nothing to do, however, but wait until he'd caught his breath. Then it came out that a plane had crashed in the lagoon. As Claire watched, the plane went into a nosedive, hitting the shallow lagoon with the speed of a rocket. Claire said the whole thing happened so quickly that he just stood there a minute, hardly able to believe his eyes. Convinced now that he had just witnessed a terrible tragedy, Claire started for Barrow on the run to get help. And so far as I could make out, he never stopped. That was how the first news of the tragedy reached Barrow.
Can't imagine flying halfway across the world in a small plane like this. Tiny, loud, cold, unsafe. I don't think Will had ever been to Alaska before they flew here. I think that was part of the appeal. He was such a world traveler. He was excited to check it out. Feels so far away from anything out here. I think it was a little bigger than this green plane here. Had pontoons. This is probably a Cadillac compared to their plane.
Hey, do you know how the school got this? Like who gave it, who donated it to the school or anything?
Well, my supervisor just told us that it was already here when our department moved out here. So Dr. Norton probably hung it up here. But the only thing I know about this is that it's been here ever since I can remember. And then in March of 2012, it got damaged because we had a broken sprinkler. And this is what remains of it.
Can I take this home? Can I have this?
No, we like it in here.
It does look good in here. Are you going to give it to someone else, if not me?
It doesn't belong to our department.
Oh, okay.
It was always here, so somebody from NARO, maybe you can talk to the UIC land office.
Okay.
Or UIC Realty, because that's who we pay our rent to. So they might know something about this.
I have like 16 bucks.
No, you'll have to talk to the owners of the building. That's my suggestion. They might know more about it than I do.
I have a Quiznos gift card too. Punch 3 times.
Sometimes, you know, memories wants to come back to me, but I would like deny it, you know. Like I would just do anything what I wanted to do. Especially when it bothers me a lot, you know, I would sit down and be paused for a while, then grab the book and start reading again.
And then sometimes it reminds you too much of your grandparents, and you'll put the book away.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want it to get too carried away with the book, you know. But it feels very good when when memory starts coming, you know.
You think there's any lessons to be learned?
There's got to be a lot of lessons that needs to be learned.
We flew into Barrow yesterday. We're going to attempt to go to the Will Rogers Wiley Post crash site. So we flew to Wiley Post, Will Rogers Memorial Airport. We're going to take some ATVs along the beach, along the winter trail. This is the Arctic Ocean. 12 miles along the coast here, all the way down to Oologah Bay, to the Will Rogers and Wiley Post Memorial. I guess we'll park the ATVs along the beach and hike in a little bit and play a song.
Well, I've come about as far as I can, and I look to the water for more direction, but there's no glow beneath. All I get is my reflection. Well, the river brings you to the sea, and it feels like I'm back at the start. I feel it over my head, and it flows on down to my open heart. I feel the blood start moving in. I feel a marker finally get made. Brother, we got a song to sing for the life here floating in this place. Hey, Will Rogers, I wrote you a song, and I've tried to sing it as best I could. I brought it as far as I can, and I've tried to stand right where you stood.
Yeah, we just rode 15 miles out here to the crash site, and it's kind of stunning. It's a lot more beautiful than I thought it would be. I'd seen some photos, and it looked pretty barren and pretty flat, and I wasn't necessarily looking forward to it being beautiful, but I feel kind of overwhelmed. It's really, really amazing. I'm glad it's worked out this way, that this thing started on water back in Oologah, and it ends on water out here near Barrow. So big and quiet out here. From what I understand, it happened kind of quickly, so I don't know that they had time to say anything else than, oh shit. But, you know, he was typing a column at the time, and they found, when they pulled the wreckage out, they got his typewriter in an unfinished column. And it's interesting, the last word he typed was death. Stopped mid-sentence, of course, but to feel the blood start moving in, to feel a marker finally be made, brother, we got a song to sing for the life here floating in this place. To feel the blood start moving in, feel the marker finally be made, brother, we got a song to sing for the life here floating in this place. When I think about Will Rogers, I think of my grandfather. They're both from a different time, and they're both from Oklahoma. I miss my grandfather a lot, and I don't have recordings of any speech he gave, or a book of his quotes, or any movies of his to watch. But I do have those things from Will, and I think that makes him a symbol of that time to myself and many others. I discovered that learning about Will and retracing his footsteps allowed me to connect with my grandfather in a way I never could have otherwise. Will Rogers connected people, and I think he still does.
You know, when I started this whole thing, it was all about songs. It was all about writing songs and writing the best songs I could. And it was all about trying to capture Will Rogers' life through a song. And more than that, it was trying to capture his life through me writing about him, something coming through me. And as I've traveled and hit other places and talked to other people, I'm kind of starting to see that it feels less and less about the songs and less about what I think of Will or what Will means to me personally. And it feels like it's more about what Will meant to other people and to everybody.
He was our hero. We didn't have heroes in those days, in 1935.
Wiretapped report to Washington came. Alaska Charlie Brower on that sad, sad day. Oh, what a state the world would be in. Oh, wily post he flew into the wind. Cleric Pihal, he watched from the shore. He'd seen him take off just moments before. That engine stalled flat and the plane dipped again. Oh, wily post he flew into. Claire ran back to town to tell what he saw. The wreckage, the water, the wings bent like straw. They gathered around to sing Eskimo hymns. They carried their bodies back into the wind. The flags, they were lowered down to half-mast. They promised the memory of both men would last. One man they called the Cherokee Kid, and one wily post who flew into the wind. But the radio waves bring 'em back to shore. But the radio waves bring 'em back to shore. Let 'em crash and roll and rip and roar. But the radio waves bring 'em back to shore.
I thank you. Good night.